Hello, everybody. It's Sunday night. The name of the show is Intuitive Inc., and I am Servette Hassan. I have an amazing guest tonight. You cannot call in. We're not live tonight. It is pre-recorded. I know I'm usually live, but I do travel and have a life. Ha-ha. You may not believe that, but I actually do. So this is just a show that's recorded. We cannot call in, and no one will answer, and it's just a great conversation because this is an amazing woman that I've gotten in touch with, and I am honored and privileged to have her on the show today. Her name is Teresa de Grosbois. She is, I'm going to spell that for you guys later because you're going to need to find her website and stuff and her books, but she's an international speaker, a 4-time best-selling author, and she's an expert on influence, which I find very fascinating. And influence is a great topic, and we're going to talk all about it because she not only teaches courses around the world on how to become an authority in your field and create a word of mouth kind of epidemic around you to get your work out there. And it really, in the end, it is all about influence. So welcome, Teresa. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I love it. I read in your book that you got into this whole field of influence because you didn't have any. Is that right?
Yeah, very, very true.
No, go ahead.
We often become fascinated with the things that we're most missing in our lives, you know.
Right.
And truthfully, probably the whole conversation around importance and influence started for me at a really young age. Because, you know, I'm not only Canadian, I come from northern Canada. I grew up in the backwoods. And I'm the youngest of a really big family. And, you know, any other youngest children out there will know importance and influence become a lot more important to you at a young age. When you're in a scenario where no one listens to you and you're often, you know, taken for granted or left behind, you know.
Yeah.
So it was a fascinating journey to kind of, you know, become someone who really is driven by the very limitations that I grew up with.
Well, yeah, I read a story in your book there that said you were young. I mean, you were 2 or 3, I think, and your mother forgot to feed you. Bless her heart. I'm sure she didn't mean that, but she just, didn't I feed you yesterday kind of thing? But suddenly you did not.
It was more, I had an overworked mom who was caregiving for 2 elderly grandmothers and trying to get 8 kids, out the door to school, etc.
Wow.
And I remember distinctly one day sitting in my high chair. And, it's funny because we often don't remember the years before age 5, but we remember the traumatic events. And this, for me as a 2-year-old, was really traumatic because I was sitting there in my high chair watching everyone leave and seeing Mom scrape all the food into the garbage, and I have not been fed. And in my mind, I created, as a 2-year-old, I'm not important. I'm less than that stinking garbage. And that inner dialogue really stuck for me, actually. And in fact, what happens with a lot of us as human beings, because we all have some version of this, right? Good people all over the world create inner dialogue when they're very young to make sense of their world. And often, looking at it from an adult lens, it doesn't make sense, but that's still running in the background, those things you made up at the age of 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
And,
absolutely.
As good people, we really need to look at that because, that conversation can start running the show. And, so for me, importance became a deeply important conversation at the age of 2 in that incident, and then I subsequently had other incidences that reinforced that. But the reality was I did what all people on this planet do because of that. I started doing either one of 2 things. Either desperately trying to prove that it wasn't true, desperately trying to prove that I am important, or desperately terrified that I was unimportant. Mm-hmm. So, go figure that I would become a global authority on influence, right?
Right.
Because that became such an important thing to me at such an early age.
So how did that manifest itself then? Did your career revolve around that at first, or did you just jump in and start writing about it?
It's kind of interesting how we tend to fall into what we're good for, because usually for most people, our inner dialogue runs in the background. We're often not even aware of it, but it dictates the directions we take in life. There's a lot of research showing this now, right? And it's not until we start taking leadership courses or communication courses that we start to realize, oh, we've got an inner dialogue and it might be running the show. Mm-hmm. So for me, pardon me, I just had to cough. For me, that journey looked like I just kept making career choices that leaned me toward influence. Isn't that interesting? I didn't even notice I was doing that. But by the age of 30, I was running multi-stakeholder initiatives all over the country to lead major change initiatives in the oil and gas sector. The only interesting thing about that was I was doing it for something I didn't really love. I liked it. I was good at it. I enjoyed it. But it didn't really light my fire in the morning. Like, I didn't get out of bed and say, oh, my God, I can't wait to go to work today. I can't wait to see what legislation I can change, or I can't wait to see, how I shift the thinking of our organization. But I naturally became good at it because my inner drivers had me consistently seeking out the projects or seeking out the opportunities that would have me get good at that. And I didn't actually realize I was good at it until, in my early 30s, I then had what I would affectionately call my really bad year, right? A lot of people have one of these, right? For me, what that looked like was in the, like the first 6 months of that year, my father had passed away, my marriage had ended, my business at the time had failed, and my health was in a complete tailspin. And the only thing I knew for sure at that time was how deeply unhappy I was. And I remember actually a moment, I'm sitting in the bathroom of my post-marriage breakup, new condo, and I'm surrounded by tools because I've always been a renovator, and this bathroom's going to be my latest project. Mm-hmm. And there's tears running down my face because the only thought in my mind is it's me that needs renovating. It's me. Because I'm looking back over the last 10 years of my life, and I can't honestly point to a time where I can remember that I was really stoked up, joyful, happy. Right. But that was such a beautiful moment, because that was the moment I decided to change my life.
Well, how old were you, like roughly? At that time?
I think it was about 32, 33 at the time.
You were young. Okay.
And I had 2 young kids at the time. So, but the neat thing about that was, it was a moment of discovery. It was a moment of possibility. Because the moment you say, okay, hang on a second, I need to be my next project.
Right.
Then shift is possible inside of that, right? Mm-hmm. And, the really cool thing was, because of that, I started doing every self-help course known to man. I got a lot more serious about my health, started doing a lot more yoga and meditation, created a better diet. I actually quit my job, started a charity, and then I wrote 3 kids' books to raise money for my charity. And the interesting thing that happened because of doing that was I learned a couple things very quickly. First, I learned I didn't really like running a charity. Isn't that interesting, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't really like being a children's author. Like, writing kids' books I loved, but going around to schools and doing kids' programs and stuff like that, it was okay, but it wasn't really lighting me up. Right. But at the same time, I had people coming at me in droves saying, 3 best-selling books in 8 months? Teresa, how the heck did you do that? And would you show me how? And so I started realizing that I was mentoring and coaching all these people in understanding how influence and word-of-mouth epidemics really work. And then it wasn't until one day I was sitting with a girlfriend of mine, Dr. Shonda Perrin. You may have heard of her work. She runs Project Forgive. Mm-hmm. And she's looking at me chuckling over a cup of tea, and she says, honey, you're venting over God sending you a flood of something you love. She says, turn it into a business. You're loving coaching all these people. And, it was one of those light bulb moments. I realized, wow, I'm like the fish that don't know what water is. Right. There's this thing I'm really good at, and I've never really been aware that I'm good at it until all these other people start flooding me with requests to help them with that. Right? Mm-hmm. And so I shifted my brand, and I shifted what I was doing in business overnight, and I've never looked back. My life has just been on fire ever since.
Well, there you go. You found your niche. And then the book, that came, I didn't know you did 3 children's. I mean, I read about Mass Influence is the name of the book for everybody out there, which was a huge seller. So is that where that book came from, or did that book, which came first, chicken or egg, the book or the workshops and the speaking engagements and all of that?
The speaking came first, and then truthfully, I actually took 4 or 5 years to write Mass Influence because I really wanted Mass Influence to be accessible to people, and it's sometimes, it's sort of like the Mark Twain quote, if I had had more time, I could have written a shorter letter. The first version of Mass Influence was a lot longer and a lot more complicated, and then I spent a couple of years of having people read it and asking them, where did you get confused and where is this book hard? And so I could really hone it down into something simple and elegant that people could really wrap their heads around. I wanted a book that had cartoons in it and simple exercises, and sometimes learning how to convey what you do in a really simple way is a little bit of a journey. So that was mine.
Right. Well, my whole work revolves around taking the mysticism out of mystics. I mean, taking the hard part, because it's not that complicated to shift consciousness, but that's what you have to do. Yeah. So I totally understand that, because that's what I try to do, is to take the mysticism out of it and make it real. So you're doing the same thing. Now, I read it, and it is easy to understand. And it really basically revolves around, I know at some point I heard you say, or read it somewhere, that you said that gaining influence for the masses is almost as simple as learning to ride a bike. And I went, okay.
It's true. It's almost like breathing, right? I meet people all the time that are like, oh, I don't have time to learn another skill. I don't have time to do this, right? But when you think about it, there was a time you had to learn how to breathe. You came out of that womb and it was all of a sudden cold and uncomfortable, and somebody whacked you on the back, and you're thinking, who is this person whacking me on the back?
Right.
And you probably coughed and sputtered, and it was deeply painful, and then you mastered the skill of breathing. And then by and large, you never thought about breathing again, unless it was maybe in those moments where your girlfriend elbowed you in the ribs and said, honey, you're not breathing right now, breathe. Or maybe there was a conversation that you learned that there is actually an advanced level of breathing when we talk about yoga or qigong or learning how to, ground ourselves in the world. But by and large, you don't go through your life thinking, oh my God, I've got to breathe for 24 hours today. Where am I going to find the time to breathe? Right? And influence is a lot like that. It's a paradigm shift. And once you get it, you simply walk through your day being the habits that highly influential people tend to have, and you don't think about it. It's not like, oh, I've got to put 3 hours of time aside today to work on being influential. It's not like that. It's simply a shift of mindset. And interestingly, once you get it, you can't actually remember a time when you didn't get it. It becomes so second nature and so easy. It's like none of us go around thinking, yeah, I remember when I couldn't breathe. Boy, that was really tough.
Right.
It's just not that. It's simply a new way of being that you take on, and it becomes who you are.
Well, Teresa, that's kind of the law of attraction, but better, because really honestly, we can't become anything different in our lives without shifting consciousness and it becoming such a part of our being that it's just a natural part of us. It's almost a foregone conclusion. And then it's almost like it's past tense. Like, oh, I've always been a best-selling author. I've always been this. And then the world catches up with that. The physical world catches up with that. Don't you agree?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I couldn't agree more. So, when you talk about the principles of law of attraction or a lot of the higher laws, a lot of them they can be related to under many topics.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
And influence is no different, right? The core principle of influence is that you've got to give influence to get influence. Isn't that an interesting paradigm?
Yeah, we got to talk about that, but definitely. Now, and that's why the law of attraction doesn't work for so many people. When The Secret came out 10 years ago, it was like, I would get hundreds of calls, literally hundreds of calls where I've watched it 1,000 times and I've done vision boards and I do affirmations and nothing's happened. And I'm like, oh my God, that's not kind of how it works. It's just a little, you've got to shift your thinking. And usually, whatever it is you want is what you give. So when you say to give influence, to have influence, you have to give influence. Just like if you want more love in your life, you should give more love. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really the core of it, right? Like, in other words, what it comes down to is you can't make yourself famous.
No.
Or influential.
Right.
Right? And when you look at how highly influential people operate, like Oprah Winfrey is a great example of this. She became the most influential woman on the planet by routinely giving influence to 20 or 30 people every day. Like, when you look at the number of people she interviews on her show,
right,
she's bringing in experts from all over the world and shining a spotlight on them and saying, look at how smart this person is. Look how brilliant their work is. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, each one of those individuals now goes and gives influence back to her. Because if you've been on Oprah, you're going to shout it from the rooftops and tell everybody to go watch the Oprah show. Mm-hmm. Right? So really what it comes down to is when you watch highly influential people, they're routinely endorsing and praising and shining a light on the good work of other people. And it's not about being inauthentic. Mm-hmm. Authenticity is actually one of the core principles. So in other words, you don't go around praising people who don't deserve it. Like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a great example of that. He first became globally influential by shining the spotlight on Rosa Parks. But they chose Rosa Parks with great intention because they had actually had a very similar situation 6 months before that, where a teenage mom had been asked to give up her seat on the bus and had been arrested. And they decided not to focus the spotlight and intention on her because they didn't think she had enough personal power that she could handle what would be coming at her. Whereas Rosa Parks was a leader in the community. She was a strong, personally powerful woman, and she deserved the attention. So they brought the force of the media and all the influence they could bear toward Rosa Parks. And that created the Alabama bus boycott, which then led to all kinds of movements that shifted the world.
Wow, I didn't know that
So
story.
when you look at how influential people operate, it comes down to that in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's true. But then how do you get to the influential people to give the influence to so that they're giving it back? I mean, that's not as easy. Yeah. I mean, everybody's 5 handshakes away from the president, they say, or something. But it's like, it's to get their attention or to even get them to respond. How do you do that then? Or what do you tell people?
That's a brilliant question, because that's where most people get stopped. Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's fine. Like, we all learn in networking, for example, that it's a good idea to offer to buy a colleague a coffee, but try phoning up the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and offer to buy them coffee, and faster than you can say gatekeeper, you'll realize that, the rules of etiquette are different with highly influential people, right?
Right.
But that's because most people are making what I would say is the biggest mistake I see in this realm, and that I would affectionately call is the premature ask. People always laugh and say the premature what, Teresa?
Mm-hmm.
But, the premature ask is like the equivalent of you've just had the new neighbor move in next door, and the first thing they do is come over and say, hey, I love your lawnmower. Can I borrow that? And, at that point, you're probably rolling your eyes up in your head going, oh, my God, who did I just move in next door to? Mm-hmm. But, of course, we all know when you want to meet the new neighbor, you tend to bring them a lasagna or an apple pie or, something really nice. But when we meet influential people, a lot of people get into this mindset of, oh, this is my one shot. I better be bold. I better get in there and make my ask, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why the gatekeepers are there, because influential people routinely have people asking them for stuff, right? Yeah. I sometimes get invited to coffee 70, 80 times a month,
Right.
And when you think about the time drain that is on your calendar, if I went to coffee 70 or 80 times a night, that's 300 hours out of my calendar.
Well,
Holy cow. I can't afford that.
Right. Or also after workshop, when I do a workshop, I have to leave. And I don't want to be rude or anything, but I'm going to get stopped by 40, 50, 60 people asking one more question. That's another 3 hours,
Yeah.
Same thing.
Well, and you see this a lot at workshops, right? Because the speaker, the guest of honor will come on stage, and they're usually the most influential person in the room, right?
Right.
And there'll be a lineup of people wanting to give them a product sample, or a copy of their book, or a copy of their CD, or a piece of their product, or asking to buy them coffee or lunch. And here's the thing: all of those scenarios are all about you, the giver. Your product sample is all about you. You're not actually really giving something. I mean, unless your product sample is chocolate, which, maybe then they want it. But really, the unspoken message is, I want you to endorse my product. That's the unspoken message. Or come for coffee with me. I want you to give me an hour of advice, or I want to sell to you. Really, all of those requests are not really all about the person who just walked off stage, right? So you need to flip that around. You want to give, or you want to get influence, you give influence. So the way to approach someone influential is to offer them influence in some way, right? And, you all have social media. You do. You could say something like, I heard you said you were speaking in Detroit next month. I have a lot of connections on LinkedIn in Detroit. Would you like me to pass on your event to them? Or maybe you would say, I know someone who has a stage in Chicago. Can I hook you up? Because I think that would be a great stage for you to speak on. That's another way to give influence. I have a radio show. Let me interview you on my Blog Talk radio show. All of those are great ins to connect with someone highly influential. And there's thousands of examples of how you can do something similar to that. But in those cases, the gatekeepers will let you through in a heartbeat. Because now the call is no longer about you. It's not a premature ask. It's an offer. And that kickstarts your ability to build relationship with that influential person.
Right. But you still have to get to that influence. You still have to get to where the gatekeeper is even. Like if you're not going to an event or something, and sometimes even then you can't get past the gatekeeper, even if you're offering something like that. Then what? How do you get them to answer the phone? How do you get them to answer an email? Or is there...
Well, that's where community building becomes so important, right?
Networking.
And because there are different things you can do. But one of the best things you can do to help you become influential in the realm that you live and work in. So, for example, if you're an expert on health, you would want to build some kind of community around health around you. Right? The best way to become influential is to become the hub of the influencers in your industry. Right. So there's lots of ways you can do that, right? You can host a conference or a telesummit, or you can create a council that draws the influential people together. There are a lot of different opportunities for you to become the person that not only draws them together, but shines a light on their good work, right? And when you start community building, what happens is that everybody starts to look to you. You actually gain the influence of all the people in your community. One of the cool things about running the Evolutionary Business Council, which is the community of thought leaders and emerging thought leaders that I started, is, our members now have a collective reach of over 150 million people. Like if you tally up how big all their followings are. The interesting thing that's happened is people now start to view me as though I have a reach of 150,000 or 150 million people. I'm like, holy cow, my reach isn't anywhere close to that. My following's only about 250,000 people. Right. So it's interesting to note how people start to view you, right? So one of the best ways to gain that influence is start building community. And it's not about the building. Like it's not about where you meet. It's about who you're gathering around you. A lot of people make that mistake. They think the brick and mortar has to come first. The brick and mortar comes last.
Right. I agree. Well, it's true. And the way other people start to view you is then for a lot of people how they begin to view themselves. It's not until other people start to feel like, and then they take it from there, because they have to have that kind of validation, and it starts to build their confidence, and then they start to become that. I want you to say the name of that again, because you are the founder and chair. It's the Evolutionary Business Council, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's awesome. I want people to know about that.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing group. Actually, it's a real privilege and a real honor to be able to hold the context for what this group is.
Well, what is it? It's an international community of thought leaders, right? Is that right?
Yeah, they're all people that are deeply committed to creating change in the world. So all of them teach transformational principles inside their work. And that's what the common element that draws them all together is, actually. Because one of the things I'm really passionate about is how do we shift the conversation of the planet by getting people to really take on looking at their own inner dialogue and shifting their mindset, right? And that conversation can be had in any realm. Like, you can talk about it in the realm of mysticism. You can talk about it as hardcore business, right? And so I just created this big, hairy, audacious goal for my life, right? What if we said we could shift the consciousness of 1.2 billion people on this planet, and that number was chosen because that's the tipping point for planet Earth, right?
Right.
But what if we could reach 1.2 billion by helping 1,200 thought leaders each reach 1 million? What if we took 1,200 people that are shifting the consciousness of other people and taught them how influence works and taught them how they could create word-of-mouth epidemic around what they're doing? What kind of epidemic around consciousness would that create on this planet? So that's what the Evolutionary Business Council is.
Yeah, that's good. That's amazing. I'm glad you're doing that.
Yeah.
And it's true, because you change one person and another person that changes. You know what I mean? It starts within the person themselves that raises the consciousness. Yeah. They raise their own consciousness, and then it raises the consciousness of the planet. Which is the other thing I'm big on is be you to the full, because that's what's really beautiful. It's about being your true, authentic self. When you do that, you shift into a place where you want to be the best you. And when you're being the best you want the best planet. You want the best everything.
Absolutely. I love how you talk about that, because it really is fun. A lot of people go through this period where they first become aware of their inner dialogue, and then their inner dialogue becomes, I'm so crappy at cleaning up my inner dialogue. Like, they start beating themselves up because they have inner dialogue. And, the reality is, you don't need to take it that seriously, because your inner dialogue probably motivates you to do positive stuff as much as it does as it trips you up. Like, I'm not important, or I'm too small to play with the big kids, which are dominant inner dialogues for me. As much as they trip me up, I mean, trust me, when I walk out on stage in front of 1,000 people and I'm too small to play with the big kids that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
But I've had to learn to really become friends with my inner child, because I'm too small to play with the big kids is also the reason I'm an influence expert and that I want to drive change on this planet.
Well, right. You learned what you learned. Because of that. And the other thing, because I teach meditation a lot too, because to me, it's key that everybody meditate. I don't care if you meditate 5 minutes in the morning every day, as long as it's at the same time. Even 5 minutes will change your life.
Yeah.
But you have to do it every day. And people will say to me, well, I can't silence my mind. And I said, well, you'll never silence. The last time my mind was silenced, I was in a coma. The thoughts are going to come. The difference is that you're not going to entertain it. You're just going to let those monkey mind thoughts go, because, they just don't give them energy. Just let it pass by and don't keep, and then do you meditate?
I do. In fact, my favorite thing to do is what I call a one breath meditation. Usually they end up being 4 or 5 breaths. But throughout my day, the minute I'm feeling flustered, ungrounded, I don't know what to do next, I'm in a difficult situation, I actually stop, let my consciousness connect, and I take one deep breath to clear my mind. And then I just ask into the emptiness, what's next? And I call that my one breath meditation. And I do that probably 30, 40 times a day. But the interesting thing of doing that, when you get in that routine habit of like always just stopping, taking that deep breath and letting your mind clear, even if it's just for those 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. Then when you attempt the longer meditations, you find it's a lot easier to quiet your mind, right? Because most people can't quiet their mind for longer than 30 seconds anyway. Right. So as opposed to sitting there in meditation and continually beat yourself up for not being able to clear your mind for more than 30 seconds, move through your day with a meditation philosophy coming in and out of your day throughout your day. If you're struggling with meditation, that's a great place to start.
Good advice. I like that. I really do. I think that's awesome because,
Well, and, it's really, like, a lot of this it's not about, like, oh, I got to go work out now. Oh, I got to go meditate now, right? Mm-hmm. This is about fun.
Exactly.
It really is. Like, because a lot of what you're trying to quiet down is your ego state, right?
Right.
But here's the thing, your ego state isn't good or bad, it just is. It's like a tool the universe gave you, and much of what is your ego was invented by you when you were 2 or 3 years old.
Right, exactly.
Right? So if you let your ego run the show, then a 2-year-old is running the show. Like, is that a good thing in your life? I don't think so, right? So it's not that your ego is bad. I love the way Jennifer Huff talks about this, right? She says, just give your ego a new job description. Mm-hmm. Your ego is not in the pilot seat. It's your higher consciousness that's in the pilot seat of your life. Your ego is there just to notice incongruities, and I give my ego the job description of having fun.
Right.
So, like, when I walk on stage and my ego there, my little inner child, Tessie, I call her, because that was my nickname when I was a kid.
Oh.
But when Tessie's there going, oh, you're too small to play with the big kids, get off this stage, I say, it's okay, Tessie, I got this one. I'm in my 50s. I can handle it.
Yeah.
But Tessie, you're in charge of fun. You get to bring fun on the stage. My little inner Tessie loves that. Then she's like, oh, okay, I'm the one who gets to make jokes and smile and make everyone happy. And all of a sudden, my ego's got a new job description, and my fear quiets. And I can be present and powerful.
Well, that's awesome. I love that. Well, in Eastern philosophy, I mean, basically, when they say here to get rid of the ego, you can't get rid of the ego, actually, and you need it. It's just that it's supposed to be a slave to the spirit, not the opposite. Just like you said, it's not supposed to be running the show. It's just, it needs to be there.
Why would we want to kill our ego? That's such a violent act against ourselves.
Exactly.
To me, that's sort of like saying you can do a masterpiece painting, but you're not allowed to use the color blue.
Right, exactly.
Like, wait a second.
That part
your
of
ego
us.
Is part of the masterpiece.
Right.
That is you.
Right.
It's part of why community building is so fun. It's part of why influence is so fun. Your ego actually, in many cases, is responsible for the fun in your life. So why would you want to kill that off? Don't kill it off. Give it an appropriate job description in the life of who you are.
Exactly. I agree 100% because when people say, well, just get rid of it, I'm like, no. But, you have to be careful about what you hear and what you choose to believe, too. Because, I've had people come up to me and say, the Course in Miracles says that the opposite of love is fear. And I'm like, well, that's nice. But to me, the opposite of love is hate, and the opposite of fear is peace of mind. So, just because it got said somewhere and then there's a whole Marianne Williamson thing around it, that's great. There's no problem with that. But that's not what I'm going to take on. Just like I'm not going to take on kill the ego either. That there's it's not just fear-based. It isn't.
Well, and I think when you really dive into what Marianne Williamson was talking about in her book, Return to Love, she wasn't talking about what most people would identify as fear. She used the word fear as a placeholder for the whole realm of emotions that are inward focused.
Right. But
so whether that is apathy, intolerance, whether that's anger, frustration, she just bucketed that all in a bucket and called that the fear-based emotions.
Right. Right.
And so, a lot of people took that very literally and said, okay, so the opposite of love is fear. But she also bucketed a lot of emotions and put them together under the heading of the love-based emotions, right? Which included joy and I think courage she considers the tipping point. If you read a lot of work, they consider courage the tipping point between outward-facing emotions and inward-facing emotions. But, she did not necessarily mean that literally, that the only two emotions on this planet were love and fear, right? So, sometimes I think it just comes down to the interpretation. People are really saying the same things, but sometimes, people take stuff a little too literally. Like, I honestly don't believe the Eastern Masters are really meaning kill the ego or get rid of your ego. I think what they're really attempting to communicate is get your ego out of the driver's seat of your life.
Exactly.
Because your ego's like 2 frickin' years old.
Right.
A 2-year-old can't drive.
None of my
right?
gurus, none of my teachers have taught me to kill the ego. Yeah. So you're right.
And that's a really important principle when we look at how we even influence anyone around us, let alone influence change in the world, right? As our lives become more whole and complete, and we're no longer just worried about our own well-being and our own happiness, then we get to that level where we can start to focus on the happiness of the world as a whole, or the happiness that comes from giving back to the community. Aristotle had a great word for that. He called it eudaimonia, as opposed to hedomonia or hedony. Eudaimonia was the state of happiness and peace that comes from being a contribution to society and being really connected to your community. Mm-hmm. So isn't that interesting? As early as, the earliest philosophers, people were talking about transformational principles in their own unique way.
Oh, yes. They've been talking about it. Didn't Marcus Aurelius write Meditations, that book in 200 something?
Absolutely. When you look at it, how old the Bhagavad Gita is, and it has many of these principles in it. Exactly. So a lot of these principles go back throughout history. And I think sometimes people were just communicating them in the best way they knew how at the time, with the language capabilities that they had available to them.
Right, but if you look they're all saying.
So as humans, we can make this all about let's be really literal, or we can make it about let's all be on this journey of helping each other figure out the way that we can all just be better versions of ourselves and more connected and more responsible for the welfare of the community as a whole. Because when the community as a whole gets better, I love the whole notion of community building for influence, because that's really where the fun and the juiciness of it comes anyway, right?
Right.
Cool thing about the Evolutionary Business Council is 7 years after it created as a virtual community, like we have retreats and people meet and we meet online, but members actually started coming forward saying we actually need a physical community, and out of that, a community is getting built in Costa Rica, where a number of our members are going to own land down there, or people can come in and, own a month of a property or whatever. And so there's now actually a physical manifestation of what the EBC is, this place that thought leaders and emerging thought leaders, or people who believe in consciousness or dedicated lifelong learning, can all come and gather in Costa Rica. Isn't that fun?
Oh my gosh,
but the community existed before the physical community did. That's the key point here.
Right. Wow. Okay, so now I'd like to, we only have like 15 minutes or so left here. I want to make sure, I know it goes really fast. I could talk to you for hours.
How does time fly? Yeah.
I know. I want to let people know how they could get a hold of you. And you said you're in Calgary, correct? Canada?
I'm in Calgary at the moment, yeah.
Yeah.
We're dealing with the smoke. There's forest fires all around us right now.
Oh my.
But yeah, if people want to, I think the best thing, if you really want to get related to the whole realm of influence and being of service to the world, I would recommend people do my 30-day influence challenge. It's a free program that I give out. And when you sign up for the 30-day influence challenge, we also send you to all the sites where you can get a free digital version of my book, Mass Influence. We give the digital version away, so you can go on iTunes or Amazon. But if you go to massinfluencethebook.com, that's all one word, massinfluencethebook.com, then you can sign up for the 30-day challenge. And that's just 30 days of like really quick 1-minute exercises. Here's something to focus on today that's going to help you build the skill and the understanding of where influence comes from and how you can become influential in the world.
Wow. Okay, great. So that is massinfluencethebook.com. I love it.
Yeah.
And you're giving the digital version away for free. How could you not take this up? I think that's awesome. And I think the other thing I wanted to talk to you about too is that you had a really interesting way of putting this. You said big is not harder. Big is just more courage. And the spark comes from how big of a problem you're willing to stand in for the world. That's fascinating to me, because really then that's where you need to start, is with your spark. Because like you said, when you were talking earlier about your younger life and at 30 going, oh gosh, I'm not happy. And you did things, but nothing, you even wrote children's books, but nothing was sparking you. It's like you do have to find, or life is much easier if you do find that spark. Is there?
Yeah, it's very true.
Is there a tip you have for people to find that?
Well, I see this, you see this really evident in entrepreneurs a lot, especially conscious entrepreneurs. And women fall into this realm a lot too, where people think they'll just practice at this little thing and then they'll go on and really do that big thing that they're really dreaming of. And the reality is the little thing could be a lot harder. Like you often see that in business, people saying, well, I'm going to run a multi-level marketing company so I can learn business, but then I'll move on to doing that really big thing. And I don't mean that as a diss of multi-level marketing companies.
Right.
But that would be an example of people playing in the smaller realm because they don't think they're ready to take on the bigger realm, right? But the reality is when you really courageously stand in a big problem, and you put yourself out there and you say, I make my life, one of the best things I ever did was I said, I make my life about transforming the consciousness of the planet. I am the tipping point for planet Earth. Now, you could take that as a really arrogant statement, or you could say, wow, that's courageous that she would say that, because people might really criticize her for saying that. Like, who the heck does she think she is saying that? But if I'm courageous enough to risk all that criticism and people who think I'm just an arrogant, SOB, then what that means is, okay, what am I going to do about that? Am I going to create a community that teaches thought leaders how to spread the word about transformation? Am I going to pull them together and show them how influence works? Am I actually going to set a real intangible goal that would represent the tipping point for planet Earth? So when you actually give yourself permission to audaciously dream and set bold, audacious goals for yourself, some interesting things happen, because people start coming at you in droves saying, wow, how can I help you with that? Like, that's the first thing that happens.
Right.
But the second thing that happens is you then start figuring, once you've had the courage to state that goal to the world, there's some part of you that starts saying, well, I guess I better take some action on this because it's really going to look bad if I do nothing. Right? And it's the action that pulls you forward and creates the possibility of it actually happening.
Right. Because I think, people have such fear around their spark, their dream, their, oh, I can't make money doing that. I can't make money being an artist, da, 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 da. And, really, you probably can if you just, get out there and start doing it,
Yeah.
So,
well, we all have fear of looking bad, right? That is a wired human condition, fear of looking bad, right? So you can choose. Do you want to use your fear of looking bad to stop you from stepping into your dreams and really contributing in the world? Or do you want to use your fear of looking bad to motivate you to actually manifest your dreams? Well, if you want it to be the latter, then state some crazy, hairy, audacious goal and tell as many people as will listen that that's your hairy, audacious goal. Because then my fear of looking bad keeps me working toward that goal every day. I harness that in a positive way because I know if I don't keep working on it, I'm going to look like an idiot for stating a goal that big and not doing anything. Right? So you don't get rid of your fear of looking bad. Use it. Use it to spur you toward your dreams.
Yeah, I've had no fear of looking bad, and sometimes I have looked bad, but you know what? At least I got out and I tried it, and that's important too. To me, there is no such thing as failure. There's only you didn't try, so if you're not failing, who said it? Somebody famous said if you're not failing at something, you're not doing anything.
Yeah, I can't remember whose quote that is, but it's a brilliant quote.
I think it was Woody Allen. But anyway, it's that type of thing. I mean, really, people get stuck. So I encourage people as much as I can and try to teach people how to go for that hairy, audacious goal, as you call it. I love that term. But it's true. And it's not arrogant. It's to me, there's nothing spiritual about playing small. You're not helping the world, you're not helping the planet, you're not helping yourself, you're not helping your family by being small. You're much better being, be big. You're supposed to be. The universe wants you to be, You're supposed to shine. And if not you, then who? Why, Yeah,
and some people are hardwired to deal with people in a one-on-one conversation. Like some people are born and they just know that they're meant to be a nurse or a doctor and largely deal with people one-on-one, right? Which is okay. That's an influential conversation, but it's one-on-one influence.
Right.
And when we look at really having mass influence, the kind of influence that really shifts the world, that's a one-to-many conversation, right? And there are some of you listening, and I'm going to speak right to you right now. If you're listening, and you know that that's you, that you're hardwired to make a bigger impact in this world, to really get out there and do something and cause shift and cause change, and something's holding you back right now, then I really encourage you to go to massinfluencethebook.com, sign up for my 30-day influence challenge, and start leaning in. Because one of the fundamental cores of influence everywhere is authenticity. And there's a lot of different definitions of authenticity out there, right? Here's mine. Authenticity is just your inside voice saying the same thing as your outside voice, right? So, in other words, your thoughts are in alignment with your words and actions. So if you somewhere at the core of your being are like, I should be playing bigger, I should be stepping out, and you're not, you're landing inauthentic everywhere because you're not loving what you're doing and it's not really sparking you up. So give yourself permission to dream. Give yourself permission to step into something big and lean in.
Wow, that's well said. Well said. I remember it reminded me of a quote from Gandhi's wife, and I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember all these. I'm getting old. But somebody asked her how she thought he was so great or how he became great. And she said that his thoughts were always aligned with his words and action.
Yeah,
it's
very
the same
true.
thing you just said, so when your inside voice matches your outside voice, then things happen, things shift, things change. That's the key. That's why I keep saying be you to the full, because that's what's beautiful, because it's like when you are being your authentic self, then those two voices have to match, or you're tricking yourself, Yeah, if you're really
absolutely
in sync with who you are, it's going to happen. See, we're almost out of time. I mean, it's crazy how fast it goes. So anything else you want to add before we go about influence in your work? I know you do you coach people, you coach authors too, don't you?
Yeah, I often work with authors to teach them how to put a book on the bestseller list, because I find that is a real tangible example of how to create a word-of-mouth epidemic. Because really, a best-selling book is nothing more than a word-of-mouth epidemic around your book. So when you understand the principles of influence and apply them to a book, then that's actually a great way to learn, what you might call the game of influence.
Right. So do you do one-on-one coaching? Or is it
I do group programs. So what I do is and that's in order to keep the cost down. I do recorded modules that people can come in. So I do 2 6-month-long programs. The first one is how to get your book written and published, and then the second one is how to mount a bestseller campaign and put a book on the bestseller list. And I split them up because sometimes people come to me with an already published book, right? And so they don't need the first level.
Right.
But the way I do it is I give the base information in a recorded module that people go listen to, and then the course starts from there. Then you start emailing me your questions, and you come on the group coaching, group mentorship calls, and we get your project completed in the back and forth conversation on email or in the group calls. And actually, often the group members start helping each other, which is really cool. So then you're not trying to do your project in isolation anymore.
Right. Now, is that, we know massinfluencethebook.com. Do you also have your own website that has information about all of that, or is that all in the same?
I do. If you want to check out my bestseller program, you can go to wildfireacademy.com, and there you can see all the different programs that I teach.
And it's called Wildfire
Academy.com.
There you go. And then, I mean, that's awesome. So you're doing all kinds of things. And then do you travel and do talks and workshops outside of Calgary?
I do. I love traveling. In fact, I like to refer to myself as an enlightened gypsy, whimsically.
I like that.
I'm often spending my winters in Costa Rica because of the community that we're developing down there. But I often, commute up from Costa Rica to do stuff in the U.S. in the winter, and then I travel down from Canada or around Canada in the summers. So, I really have a lot of fun with that.
Good. Do you ever come to the States? Are you down here, stateside?
Of course.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Good. Well, all of that is on wildfireacademy.com, wherever you're traveling to, and all of that information, as well as the book coaching.
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely.
And you coach other people. You coach business people, entrepreneurs too, as well. Correct?
I mostly work with speakers, trainers, writers, authors, and radio hosts. That's the predominant group that I work with. Although in the Evolutionary Business Council, we also have certain members that are like documentary makers or television hosts, because the influence game is really the same in almost every realm.
It is.
What makes people influential you can apply the same principles, whether you're talking about radio or print journalism or whatever. Right. The principles work the same everywhere.
No, it's true. I just watched a documentary called I, God with Rashmi, and she was one of the producers with Neil Donald Walsh and a few other people, and it's the same realm. It's just a different form, but it's the same realm of communication, I think it is. Wow, this has been,
I would agree.
This has been fascinating, and I think for people out there that are listening, I would highly recommend that book, Mass Influence, because it really does show you. You did, there's so many things you talked about in it that I didn't get to, but that, just little things, and it's not as complicated as you think, and you put that into words so succinctly and so well that I really think it's like, and you talked about how influence was kind of like a currency, and that made it make more sense to me too. So people, go get the book, Mass Influence. Teresa de Grosbois is the writer. I'm going to spell the last name. It's D-E, little d-e, and then capital Grosbois. Any last and final words, Teresa? We're signing off here.
Well, I would just say, take action toward your dreams, because a lot of people step in the realm of law of attraction and they don't realize that the key is action, because until you take action, you're just dreaming. Right.
Exactly. Well said. And you know what? My website is ServetteHassan.com, ServetteHassan.com. You can email me there, Servette@ServetteHassan.com. I will be back again next Sunday, and I will be live, and you can call in and we'll talk together once again. Such a pleasure, Teresa. Thank you for joining me, and take care. It's all good.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. Bye. Thanks for joining us. Take care, everybody, and be you to the full. That's what's beautiful. Good night.